Got it. Okay, it's my pleasure to have Seth Miller with us today. Seth is first and foremost my son-in-law, and I have had a great deal of experience traveling with Seth, who is the commensurate traveler. We went to Japan about 5, 6 years ago with him and my daughter, and had an incredible time. And his ability to coordinate and put together an awesome trip is, well, he should hire himself out for that, but it'd be rather expensive, I think. So I've appreciated the times we have traveled with him. He runs a blog, The Wandering Aramarian, that I have, I think, sent a link out for. And this is a great overview of all things travel. So when it comes to trends in travel, Seth is the man to know. Seth, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks so much, Mark. You all can hear me, right?
Yeah, let me just interrupt and please
Sure.
ask everybody to mute their devices if you can.
Yeah, and I will talk fast. I know there's something of a schedule here, but we'll talk fast and hopefully be able to get through and take some questions at the end. To Mark's point, though, yes, I have been, I'll say, addicted to travel for far longer than is healthy. I grew up, my grandmother lived under the approach to the Tampa airport, and I used to listen to the aviation band radio of the planes overhead, and that was sort of the beginnings of my obsession with flying and air travel especially. And so Mark asked me to give a bit of a presentation here about the future of travel, and I thought both because, you know, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it, but also the history of travel is also very cool. It would be a fun opportunity to take a look at some of the history of travel as well as we're going through this. So this is me. I think Mark probably shared this picture of me in the invite last week, but standing in front of the engine for an Airbus A220 a couple months ago when it was being delivered to the airline. And like I said, I am very much a travel addict. The last couple of years have been very interesting in that context because there hasn't been much travel. But the industry has continued to change and innovate and move forward in so many ways. And I think, you know, the phrase "what's old is new again" comes around a lot, but there are a lot of things in the travel space that really, especially with air travel, where that applies. And so this is the audio on this is terrible, so I'm going to mute it. But this is an advertisement from American Airlines in 1971. And this is on board one of their airplanes. This is a 747, one of the early ones. And upstairs, they actually installed a piano bar. The story here is that this gentleman finally meets a woman, and, you know, everything goes well at the end of the commercial because he learned to play the piano and take lessons. But bars disappeared for a while, but they're back. Unfortunately, if you're flying in economy class, you don't get to hang out here. But if you're on one of the 100-something A380s that Emirates flies and are flying via Dubai somewhere, or from Newark to, I think, Milan and Athens, they also offer service, so you don't have to go all the way to the Middle East. You can hang out at this bar in the back of the plane. I've done it before. It is a great way to not sleep on a red-eye flight when you should be. So I don't always recommend it, but it's fun. You hang out, you have some drinks, you can chat with other passengers. It really is the social aspect to it. So that is definitely still a thing. Obviously, the sort of golden age of travel dining experience, you're not going to get this food on a flight these days necessarily, but the idea of, you know, a flight attendant offering sommelier services and caviar on board is not completely gone. This picture is from another friend of mine from literally last week. So they're still serving caviar on board if you're flying first class with all the accoutrement. This is on Singapore Airlines from JFK to Frankfurt, but they serve it on all their first class routes. So something to consider. The food situation. What's interesting is, you know, this was an economy class meal from SAS in the early 80s. And this is an economy class meal on Swiss today, sort of. The option is there, but you have to pay for it. And in this case, the upcharge on Swiss, I believe, is somewhere in the $20 to $30 range. It's not cheap, but the opportunity to get to something of that sort of golden age of travel food environment does still exist, at least in a few different areas. I personally, if you can swing it, I'd say bring a snack with you or buy something in the airport. It's almost always going to be better food, but not always an option. The cabin has similarly changed a lot. The space that I showed in that first picture of this, or not the first, the SAS dining picture, obviously looked a lot more than this. This is a People Express plane from, I'll say, the early 80s. And this is a Spirit Airlines plane from today. It is a whole lot of seats. The seats are much thinner. They're much lighter. So you can fit more in and the plane can fly more efficiently with them. So win some, lose some. It's sort of hard to tell here but if you look, I think sort of the second row of seats, you can almost see the seats are injection molded plastic now, rather than heavy duty aluminum and other metals building them out, and much more fuel efficient. In this case, it's sort of a cup almost that accommodates your body. And the way that seating has changed already is massive. And truly the way that seating is going to change in the industry is also going to be significant in the years ahead. All three of these cabins are on the same Delta Airlines plane. And on the left, we have a premium economy seat. So a little extra space. It's probably close to what economy class used to be, but even a little better. The middle is economy class, and the right is what they call Delta One. We would call that business class today, probably, with the caveat that before we would have called it first class, business class, and coach. And for better or worse, the name coach hasn't changed, but what we call the other cabins on board does from time to time. There's a few airlines that will do first class, business class, premium economy, and economy all on the same plane. And some will even try to have multiple different types of economy. But regardless of what you want to call it, the general concept is the same. If you're sitting in the front of the plane, you definitely got the better seat. It's going to be more like a bed. This is an Emirates first class suite from one of their 777s. And I show it both to demonstrate that you can in fact have a lovely bed on board, but right in the middle there, you see that screen. The digital transformation that's happening in terms of how passengers get to travel is huge. That screen is an intercom to the flight attendants. It offers ordering of meals. So there's a menu on there, and it controls the entertainment system. That's the small screen for this seat. The larger screen is like a 20-something inch television that's at the foot of the bed that you can't see in this angle. The other thing I'll note is this is a middle seat, which you wouldn't think. But if you look around the middle window there, you'll see there's actually a couple holes. Those are used to mount a bassinet for a baby. Those windows are fake. Those windows are actually projected images from a camera outside the plane. And so Emirates has come up with a way to make the middle seat actually appear to be a window seat. And I think that's incredible. They actually close off one of the real windows with a blank panel and put just a little camera on it. And it's, basically like strapping a GoPro to the outside of the airplane and then reprojecting those images inside. So there's a lot of digital things that are going on. Does this mean we could have windowless planes in the future? Technically, yes. There's still a need for some real windows for emergency use and for the pilots to be able to see out and check the flaps if the sensors go bad or things like that. I don't think it's going to come anytime particularly soon, but the idea is there, and there's a lot of savings involved. The aircraft is more stable and more, you get less wear and tear on the skin with that. These are some other crazy ideas that have been at trade shows over the last few years. The blue one on the left is called the Skyrider. The blue one on the left has been making the round since 2010. I don't think this is ever going to fly. The yellow one on the right was their revamped version a couple years later. That's me on the left sitting in it back in 2010. And you can tell how small it is by that guy on the right trying to get his camera in there while he's sitting there. They're pitching this as something that they think could create incredible density on board. I think it's, like I said, I don't think it's going to fly. I don't think it's a good idea. There's a lot of safety challenges that go around it. So the concept, sure, crazy and fun, and it got a lot of press, and every few years it comes back, but don't worry too much about that. You shouldn't have to expect that this is going to be something you'll actually end up sitting in. This seat, on the other hand, you just might. And this is called the Paradigm seat, and it's spelled funny, but the Paradigm seat by Lift Aero. And Lift Aero is a design and seat manufacturing company. They have a lot of cool things out there. But if you see on the right there, there's a double armrest between the seats. And this is designed for what they believe will be the next generation of single aisle aircraft, which will be a little wider. The current limit you have in seating right now is that the 3 seats on one side of the plane end up somewhere in the 56 to 60 inches. So if you're taller than 5 feet, you're not going to be able to lie down in them no matter what. Paradigm and the lift folks think that there's going to be a slightly wider version of the single aisle plane coming along, and that they can make the seats a little wider and also add the double armrest, and you get a lot of opportunities. So the top row there would be a typical just regular economy class, right? What we're used to. You get your seat, you get your armrest, it's fine. Everybody gets an armrest, so you're not elbowing each other, but it's still the normal. If you take the second row there, it's sort of what they think as a premium economy seat. Maybe there's a little extra leg room in between or not, but if you flip one of the armrests up and you can sort of stretch out into that space, now you've got an extra few inches of seat width, which basically is what premium economy is from a seating perspective these days. And then the third one is if you put all the armrests up and you have purchased all 3 seats, you can lay down and get what we call poor man's business class. Right, when you get on that plane across the Atlantic Ocean or across the Pacific and you find out that you don't have any seatmates, it might just be the happiest day ever. You can actually lay down and get some sleep on board. I mean, whether they sell it as where you have to buy all the seats or you just get lucky, obviously remains to be seen. But this also depends on new aircraft designs coming along that are a little bit wider, a little bit bigger. So probably not going to happen real soon, but this is the sort of thing that's coming along. I'll also say the headrest with the wings on it like that is a very popular design choice these days. That is actually something that we are seeing roll out in the industry, very much in premium cabins, but also even in economy class on some airlines. I think Etihad has a 1 wing, not 2 wings, but you get 1 wing on your seat. And for some of their long haul planes, so again, you can lean your head against that to sleep rather than falling over on your seatmate, which is always a good thing. This is another concept. It's the Zephyr seat, Zephyr. This is sort of a double decker, as you can see on the right there, stacked premium option for people that want the ability to lay down from a business class seat, but don't necessarily care about the caviar and the fine dining and the wine and all of those other things. This is a very high density sort of business class opportunity. The seat's under development. I know the guy who's been working on it. It's a very neat concept with minimal moving parts, which is very important for reliability and lower weight, which makes it all work. But yeah, as of yet, hasn't quite made it into production and onto an airplane. But when we start talking about, sort of what the slightly longer term future might be, this is the sort of thing that 5 or so years down the line very well could be flying, that lets people who are willing to, pay a little bit of a premium, get that significant extra space on board and sort of curl up in your little cocoon as you go flying. Speaking of a cocoon, this is the newest business class seat on the market. It was unveiled 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it will be flying on Finnair starting next week. They're going to retrofit their long haul planes. What's interesting about this one is it is a business class seat. It creates the flat bed. It's got storage and a nice TV screen and all those fun things. It doesn't have, I shouldn't say any, but it has very few moving parts. The sort of cocoon shell that you see, the navy blue on the left there, that is all a fixed space. And one of the big challenges with premium seats today is how they they articulate, so they go recline from upright to bed mode, essentially. And some it's sort of, you have an up and you have a down. Some they have a sort of continuum of space. Some they flip over one way, they flip over another. They can be complicated. That's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of weight. It's a lot of things that can break. And all the weight and things that can break is terrible if you're in the airline industry, because if that seat breaks and you've got someone who paid thousands of dollars to be sitting there, you've got a big problem. The idea here is to dramatically reduce the moving parts, and then along with that, dramatically reduce the weight for lower fuel burn, which further saves money. So this one's an interesting one because, though it doesn't have any of those moving parts, how you recline, how you relax, what the sort of mid-flight mode is versus sleep mode remains to be seen. So like I said, it's brand new. This is another quick video I'm going to show, and I think, if I remember correctly, this is one where I've narrated it already once. I'm going to re-narrate it now because I think it'll be a little more interesting to update it. But this was a concept shown off by Airbus a few years ago, and we should talked at the very beginning about the upper deck bar on the 747s of yore. This is a concept for taking away some of the baggage and cargo space on a wide body aircraft and putting passenger amenities downstairs. And there's a few Airbus airplanes that already can put lavatories, the bathrooms downstairs, but that's relatively uncommon. There's a couple airlines who do it. This is an idea of going well beyond just the bathrooms. And so I'm going to mute me here. You can sort of see there's the stairs in the middle there of this first cabin. As you go down the stairs, you would see seating areas, workspaces. There's a storage closet in behind it. The second sort of zone there has what looks like computer screens on it. It could be divided up as a work area, something like that. The third zone that they have in there, well, I'm narrating too fast now. The third zone that they have gets to be the movie room that they would conceivably set up. So you have like the social area where people could sit around a table. There's a screen on the wall there that you can watch the movies, things like that. And then the fourth room is bunk beds. And the idea of bunk beds on an airplane, again, for the economy class passenger who just needs a couple hours of flying horizontal to get a nap, that is sort of a holy grail concept. Air New Zealand, I believe, had proposed putting something similar actually on the main deck at the back of some of their long haul planes shortly before the pandemic hit. So it didn't happen, but the same idea of you can sort of rent bed space in addition to your seat at somewhere down the line. Another trend that we're seeing, another sort of area, especially related to trying to reduce fuel burn and reduce emissions, is changes to the physical aircraft themselves. And some of these concepts are downright wacky. This is a plane where those wingtips end to end are about the same width as a traditional aircraft that we're familiar with today. The engines are about the same size, but they're mounted in a very different location. And the body of the aircraft itself, that sort of flying V wedge-shaped design, is massively different. Rather than, between 6 and 10 or 12 seats across, at sort of the back of that main section, you're probably looking at maybe 20 or 25 seats across. So this goes back to the idea of maybe having some of those synthetic windows, pretending to have outdoor views that are projected back into via screens being useful. There's a model of this that has actually done some test flights, a scale model, to prove the aerodynamics can work. They're obviously still refining, and who knows if we'll scale up. But the concept of sort of a flying wing is being supported by a lot of different companies. This is a rendering from Airbus of their similar flying blended wing concept. And this one also has their Zero E mission. This one is supposed to be hydrogen powered, which they also have a turboprop version. And just this morning announced that they are going to take one of the old 380s that has been retired and turn it into a test aircraft. So you can sort of see on the top of the fuselage there, they're going to retrofit that plane and mount a engine so they can test how a hydrogen burning engine will perform in flight. Obviously, to get to the point that you can test any of these things, you need to actually have it on an airplane. And their decision to use an A380 for this is both very cool, because the A380 is the largest commercial aircraft that ever flew and is massive and pretty cool, and people love talking about it, but also it was terribly inefficient as a 4-engine airplane. And so using it to become the test bed for the next level of sort of fuel efficiency is a kind of interesting concept to me. Electric is also a big deal. Magnix is offering electric aircraft now, and that's loud. This is a demo reel. This was their first flight of this plane. This is a seaplane out of Harbour Air, so up in Canada near Vancouver, and it actually has flown. The problem right now is that the entire back half of the plane is filled with batteries, not people. And to the earlier conversation about energy density and raising concrete blocks, storing electricity for a flight is not quite as inefficient as concrete blocks, but right now it's pretty close. There's a lot of challenges in terms of having enough electrical power stored on board to be able to go fly somewhere and then theoretically fly back, so you get back to the base where you would swap out the batteries potentially or recharge your airplane. There's a lot of people working on it. There's a lot of innovations happening in the battery space today, but energy density with batteries is going to be a big problem. The hydrogen that Airbus is pursuing has higher energy density. Some of you may remember the Hindenburg incident, so there's some concern about that concept as well. They say they've solved most of those problems, but there is some challenges there. Speaking of electric and getting into the very small level, this is the Joby aircraft. This is their test model. If I remember correctly, this one actually just crashed in a test flight, so don't get on it yet. But they are very close to coming to a position where they will have electric aircraft, vertical and takeoff and landing. So you don't need a runway. You need, a 50-foot radius or something like that, so it can drop down in with no power lines or trees around. This is a 4-seater plus a pilot. There are some other concepts out there. This is another view of the Joby one. This is one from a company called Lilium based in Germany. Again, a few seats on board, this sort of concept of getting up and down vertically at vertiports rather than airports and being able to use it as a commuter type facility. I don't know that we're ever quite going to get to Jetson's level, or certainly not in my lifetime, but the idea of being able to fly for commuting rather than drive is definitely something that has inspired creativity and inspired people over the ages. And it certainly has not stopped. If anything, it's picking up pace as people are pouring money into development of these electric aircraft. Back to the history lesson. This is the Pan Am Clipper, the flying boat, not flying anymore for many, many obvious reasons, but this is a plane that has been proposed that is almost a flying boat again. The idea here is it would stay very close to sea level, probably flying under 200 feet the entire way, so serving coastal areas only. But the value proposition here is a fewfold. One is that it is electric, again, so there's that low emissions thing. The other is that because it stays so low, it's not classified as an airplane for FAA regulations. It's actually classified as a boat, even though it gets off the water, and it would be regulated by the US Coast Guard. And pilot issues, and we can say whether it's a pilot shortage or an unwillingness for companies to pay pilots enough money to hire that, to just, to make people convinced that they should be working as pilots, or unwillingness of passengers to pay more money so that people can pay the pilots more money. Pick which range where you want to be on that spectrum of theories. But if it was regulated by the Coast Guard rather than the FAA, the rules about how to qualify to be a pilot would change, and that could potentially open up a lot more opportunities for people to work there that could help reduce the costs and bring this to life. Concorde, supersonic travel. There is a company called Boom Supersonic that is trying to bring it back. This is a rendering of a concept they are working towards. This is what they call the Overture. The company also has the XB-1, which is their demonstration aircraft. The XB-1 is doing ground tests right now, and they expect will probably fly this year. When it is a very small, scaled down model that sort of to demonstrate some of the control systems and things like that for supersonic flight. For Boom to get into service, they've announced that where they plan to build them and a lot of other things, but there are a number of challenges related to funding. It costs billions and billions of dollars to develop a new aircraft, especially when you have zero infrastructure to start. And there's some questions about the sonic boom and what the impact of the noise is going to be from those airplanes. And those are very much unanswered questions right now for Overture, but if things go perfectly to plan, this might be flying by the end of the decade with passengers on board. I would bet the over if you were making odds on that, but I think it'll be later than that if it happens at all. But it's a very cool concept, and I missed out on flying Concorde back in the day, and would very much enjoy the opportunity to fly supersonic. So I'm both excited and worried about this one. Are you not entertained? To spoil Gladiator a bit, entertainment on airplanes used to be, nothing or a book, or from time to time a shared screen like this. Today, many, many more planes have the option of a screen on board, and they're now to the point, it actually turns out almost all the screens that you can get on an airplane today are HD for new ones. Some, obviously the existing ones are the older technology are not. It turns out it's cheaper to get an HD screen on an airplane than a non-HD screen because they're all manufactured by companies that make regular TV screens. They're more, robust and less likely to shatter in glass if you hit it with your head in a crash. So there's some other challenges there, but the screens themselves, the underlying technology is sort of off the same assembly line. So if they wanted to produce lower quality screens to match the old stuff, they'd have to spin up an old assembly line. So the new screens are all HD, all super bright, sort of similar to the stuff you can get on a TV or a tablet that you're buying these days. There's also the concept of sort of streaming it to your own device, which for many of the airlines that don't have the screens on board, they'll put a little box in the sort of the bottom right-hand corner. You can see this. This is Blue Box, is one of the vendors that makes these. These are basically a lunchbox computer, including a battery, a wireless router, and some hard drives, and that handle and a web server. And so all of that goes together, and they take it off the plane with them at night to recharge it. They put it, the flight attendant or the catering crew puts it back on board in the morning, and it streams out videos. It can do food ordering, and it can do a moving map, all sorts of things like that. So this is definitely a segment of the market that is growing rapidly. Some of you guys might remember these headphones from flying on board, the pneumatic tubes where you had to plug it into the armrest. Today, no wires required. Bluetooth headphone pairing is the next sort of, I don't say the next big thing, but it is a big thing that is coming to aircraft, and nose to tail. United Airlines' newest fleet of 737 MAX 8 aircraft all have, every seat you can have the nice screens, and you can pair Bluetooth headphones to listen to them. I want to give one little anecdote of history going back to that the old screens that I showed in the back here. One of the interesting challenges they had with this back in the day was, and with the pneumatic headphones, is the audio didn't travel at the right pace. And so there was actually a setup where they had film, and it was strips of film that rolled through projectors, but they had it running extra long distances sort of underneath the plane, the full length, rather than just in the projector, so that it could project the image correctly and also offset the timing of the audio so that it sounded right for the people watching, which is just a bizarre that someone thought about that and put that all together and managed to make it work, especially given the limitations and considerations they had at the time. And the last thing I want to talk about, and I know I've been talking very quickly, sorry about that, but I know we have a time limit here, is internet on board airplanes. There was a project from Boeing and Iridium 20-ish years ago. It didn't go very far. It was satellite connectivity. It was incredibly heavy. The companies using it describe it as flying with a grand piano strapped to the roof of an airplane. So not aerodynamic, very heavy, very inefficient, and the connection wasn't very good. Along came GoGo, and they started with an air-to-ground system that was basically strapping a Wi-Fi, a cellular hotspot to the bottom of the plane. And then we went back into satellite. So this is a satellite radome on a JetBlue A220. This plane was probably 9 months old at this point now. And what's under that little cap, and it's not that little of a cap, you'll see here, is this. This is the antenna that provides the satellite connection. The white part on the left there that's on those servos is the antenna itself. And then everything else in there is motors to control it. It's important to remember that when when you have like DirecTV at home or whatnot, you put that dish outside, and that dish is bigger than the one that's under this radome, and it is generally speaking not moving, and the satellite is generally speaking not moving. If you try to translate that into 500 miles an hour of an airplane moving through the sky, that antenna has to constantly tilt and shift and rotate so that it's pointing in the correct direction all the time. So that makes for some very interesting mathematics and control systems of the plane needing to know exactly where it is and where the satellite is, and to sort of keep that straight line between them. But you can see there's a guy standing in the background there that gives you some sense of scale. That the part inside the radome, it's called, which covers the a radar dome that covers that whole system, is about 8 feet long front to back, and the system's about 30 inches wide. But there's also small antennas. This is me holding one of the newer air-to-ground antennas that can actually transmit massive amounts of data if it has the spectrum available. So that we're definitely moving in the direction of more and better and faster options. This is one other option that antenna, those guys are holding an antenna that promises to deliver about the same efficiency as this one, but significantly smaller. You can see that they're holding it there. It's also what's called conformal. It has no moving parts. All of the steering and management of the connections in there and how it talks to the satellite is handled through digital circuitry. Electronically steered phased array is the fancy name for it. And it is sort of the holy grail of antenna technology. Military has them. They use them regularly. They love them. But the military can afford to pay millions of dollars for an antenna, and airlines, generally speaking, can't. And so that becomes a bit of an awkward situation. But I would say, you know, this is a commercial version. OneWeb, the guy on the right in the picture, is the satellite operator. On the left is, I believe, is GDC Technics. They are the company that's doing some of the manufacturing and research and design for this particular antenna product. They think they'll probably have something that's flying on airplanes in a couple of years. And the OneWeb satellite constellation also is offering increased capacity. So with the new technology, the new hardware, those things all coming together, what once was a sort of novelty of maybe I can sort of make a phone call on a plane or have internet on a plane is likely to become a very real thing, with, I don't want to say same performance as on the ground, but at least performance that's usable and consistently so when you're on board. So that was me speaking very quickly for 30 minutes there. And I hope it was intelligible and useful and raised some interesting questions about what the future of air travel might be like on board, or what the planes might look like. I certainly know we were running long on time here. I'm happy to spend a few minutes answering questions that any folks have. So I don't know what the process is for that, but please feel free.
Go ahead, Frank.
Oh, yes. So thank you. A very interesting talk about the gee whiz. But when I fly, wherever I fly, it's like traveling in a subway, because mainly the younger generation wants to look at their screen and they all shut the windows. So you're traveling, and if you're on a long flight, you're 6 to 14 hours in the dark.
Yeah, that's why I take a window seat.
No, even if you take a window seat, then they tell you, oh, could you put your screen down?
Yeah,
because your neighbor wants the dark. What is this flying in the dark business?
There's some good reason for it with circadian rhythms and trying to acclimate to the new time zone and things like that. One of the problems with all those big fancy screens that are in all the seat backs is glare. And so the open windows create a problem there. I take a window seat, and I am happy to explain that I am much more comfortable with the window open and I need it for my adjustments. There is a bit of a back and forth there and some challenges of trying to be a nice guy on the plane and not be a jerk about it. But I will say the 787s have tried electrochromatic windows, which is they tint, but there's no shade. And so they basically sort of have two layers of the glass or multiple layers of glass, and in between the thin film that when you put a current across it changes color. Like a Kindle does the same thing, right? You have an ebook, you put current across it and it changes little pixels. This is the full screen can change, and it goes from transparent to translucent and sort of darker. The idea there is that the shades don't break and you can make it dark in the plane while still being able to look outside. Personally, I don't love those for a few reasons. One, the flight attendants can control them from the central computer. So in the galley, if they say, oh, Mr. Miller, we're sorry, you need to make it darker now, they can go and push the button and then make it so that I can't control it anymore. I have had that happen, and I'll say politely, but certainly asked to have it unlocked. And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But that is a challenge. I'm a window seat guy. Like I said, I will stare out the window for hours on end, even if we're just over the ocean looking at clouds. So it's a tough call there.
Seth, I had a question about the issue of incivility. There was an article in, I think, New York Times in the last day or two that had to do with 85% of flight attendants in the last 2 years have experienced some type of form of severe incivility.
Yeah.
yes, customers are the lifeblood of the airline industry, but do you know of anything that they're thinking of doing to curtail this new wrinkle in travel, which I have to admit is a bit of a deterrent to a lot of us. We think about it, go, God, I don't want to put up with that.
Yeah,
So,
I know. I certainly understand where you're coming from. There's a lot more stress in flying today than there was 3 years ago. Let me just be blunt about that. I have started traveling for work again. I have not done a ton of travel for pleasure like I used to. Every now and then I'm adding a little bit of leisure bit onto some of my work trips to try to get back into that habit. But right now, stress wise, it's kind of not worth it to me. As for the instability in the air, part of that, I think, is we're hearing about it more. There have always sort of been, if I may, assholes that have been flying. They've usually done a better job of containing themselves there, but there are stories going back many years of some of the crazy incidents on planes. But I do think people have gotten a bit more self-assured in thinking that I can do whatever I want anywhere I want over the past few years. And unfortunately, I think the enforcement of rules and sort of, I don't want to say put everybody in jail because I don't think that's the right solution, but the motivation to not behave that way, the concept of might I be punished if I'm a jerk on board, doesn't really exist. And the statistic I can throw at you is there's been about 5,000 incidents reported of unruly passengers, not flight attendants, that have been reported in the last, I want to say 18 months or so, since the FAA and the Department of Justice have asked for more aggressive reporting from the flight attendants so that they can further investigate and make, take deterrent action. Of those, only 80 people have been charged. And I'm willing to believe that not everybody needs to have been charged. Not all of them were probably criminal, but unfortunately, the wheels of justice turn incredibly slowly. And in many of these cases, people who should have faced more significant punishment or at least dissuasion for their behaviors are not. And I think that's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy until there seems to be a shift in the actual enforcement actions, and people, even if you just get arrested and have to spend the night in jail when you land kind of thing, I think people will start to finally realize, maybe this isn't such a good idea.
The answer, I think, is to blackball these individuals.
There is discussion right now about a no travel list.
Fly.
Yeah, there is discussion about a no fly list related to this. Delta Airlines came out about that a couple weeks ago, more aggressively. Again, one of the challenges there is that list would only apply to those who have been convicted. And in the interim, those people would potentially be able to fly on other airlines. I will say that all of the airlines currently have lists internally of people that are not allowed to fly. And I think Delta's over 1,000, United was over 1,000. It's not a lot of people, but it's a lot of people. But the challenge there is they aren't sharing them. And the idea of whether that becomes a shared situation is, do you have to wait till they're convicted or not? And if you don't, does it become a risk of a renegade flight attendant ruining someone's day and or life? I don't think that flight attendants are going out of their way to do that. And I would be on their side, generally speaking, even though I've been on the receiving end of some interesting flight attendant experiences over the years. I'm certainly on their side in this context, but there's some sort of, how is it going to work legally, questions about how any of that would come together. So it's a tough spot.
So I've got some questions about seating. I'm 6'3".
Congratulations. I got nothing for you.
A normal trim weight. I have to pay extra for legroom.
Yes.
When are they going to charge people extra because they're overweight? That's my first question. And my second question is, because of my height, the bump in the back is always low down, as is the headrest. None of the designs that you showed, so any ability to change the height of the headrest or anything like that, is there anything like that can be built in?
Sure. So the weight thing, I will say there are some, especially in very small airplanes, where the weight and balance situation is significant. They will weigh passengers, and I believe there was one airline in American Samoa that actually did tie fares to weight. It made the rounds when that came along, and it obviously, I mean, they were flying very small prop planes with 8 to 10 seats on them.
Having been to Samoa, I can tell you there are quite a few Samoans who are 400 to 600 pounds.
Yes. You can understand why that was a good market for this, let's say. There are, all the airlines I'm aware of have rules about what they call customers of size or passengers of size, that theoretically they're requested to purchase a second seat if they overflow the armrests. If you are looking for that extra bit of comfort, Southwest Airlines actually has the most customer-friendly version of that policy, in that if the flight does not go out, you buy 2 tickets, and if the flight does not go out full, you get a credit back for the extra seat that you purchased. So
what about the person who has been overlapped?
Yes. Well, so part of the challenge is one has to defend their space on board, and this. Now we're going back to our incivility problem on board challenge, so you can understand where this gets difficult. But if you recognize the problem early on, I would say if you can involve the flight attendant perhaps, and explain that there's a challenge there or something like that. But as for the headrest situation, there are models where it does go up and down. There's flaps, there's support for under the neck for while you're sleeping. There's a 6-way headrest, there's a 4-way headrest. All of those things sort of do exist. It's all about the money, and they cost extra. And as I sort of alluded to before, there's more moving parts, which means maintenance and ongoing cost extra. So the airline has to choose to invest in having that on board. They're not going to charge you extra for the headrest to move. That's, well, I don't want to say no promises, but they shouldn't be able to make that as an ancillary fee situation. But it is something the airline has to decide they want to invest the extra X dollars in this more comfortable headrest for it to become available.
At what point in your pay scale, your cabin level, might you get something like this? Or does it vary with the airline?
It varies with the airline, definitely. There are a number of airlines, and even within an airline, different aircraft have movable headrests or not. JetBlue's newest airplanes all have movable headrests. Their older planes do not, as a good example. If you're in premium economy or business class, you're almost guaranteed that it will be a movable headrest as part of that, just because of the upcharge and the expectations of that product. But there are a number of economy class products, especially on long haul aircraft, where they have moved into that space, but there's plenty also that haven't, unfortunately.
One last question. All these aircraft are different.
Yep.
Different airlines, different aircraft. Is there a website you can go to? Like, I think there was one, Flight Guru or something.
It was Seat Guru.
Seat Guru, where you can find out what you might get for a given price.
Yeah, Seat Guru was a great product, and actually knew the founder of it for a while. They sold out to TripAdvisor, and TripAdvisor has more or less abandoned the project, so they don't update it very much, and it's lost a lot of its value there, unfortunately. It's a tough question. I will say Google Flights, if you do a search, offers a decent amount of information. There's things like the seat pitch on average, or the seat width on average, or whether it's going to have power at the seat, whether it's going to have internet at the seat. They've done some things, I think, around food as well. So there are some options there for sort of getting some of that extra information. I'll see if I can show you. Yeah, here, let me share this real quick.
Okay. I think we'll wrap it up with this one.
Yeah, okay. Here we go, share. I believe y'all can see search results now for a flight from Ithaca to Los Angeles. And so over on the right side here, if I click the little arrow to expand one of the trips in Google Flights, and it will tell me I'm gonna get average legroom on the flight to Detroit, and then average legroom on the second flight. There will be Wi-Fi on the plane. It will have power. It will have that streaming media. That plane, I got to talk to my friend who runs this site. That plane also has screens in it, so you'd have in-seat screens as well. The United Airlines plane looks a little different because it has slightly different benefits and systems on board. And American Airlines is yet again different from that. So, the American Airlines plane is only 30 inches of legroom for that long flight, whereas the other guys, United maybe was 30 inches on the short flight, things like that. So Google Flights, if you expand it out, does offer some of those details. And that's would probably be my go-to at this point, mostly because I know the guy who produces the data, and so I trust it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Thank
well, let's give a hearty round of applause for our speaker. Thank you, Seth.
Thank you all for having me. And I'm glad we had crows and energy density to kick it off, because those tied well into the flying conversation today.
That was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy.
Yeah,
and I put my email address on there, and obviously Mark knows how to get in touch with me. If any of you all are interested in this stuff, I will do that very fast, talking about it all day long. So happy to keep the conversation going.
Thank you.
Thank you.